Guys, congratulations on this book, because during this 100th anniversary of Disney, there's a lot of people that don't know this. And this right here is a beautiful step in sharing the entire journey.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, we would like to say that we timed this deliberately for the 100th anniversary, but really it's just a very happy coincidence.
I've become such a collector of the Disney stuff when it comes to these stories, the books that have come out and stuff, and this one fits right in there, because it's, you get into these conversations and you go, but wait a second, did you know that there could have been a Disneyland on the mountain?
Yeah, that was the hope.
How did you research for this book? Where did you go to get everything?
So it was certainly a combination of a lot of different things, as you could imagine, because the story was so massive. We certainly, we combed through thousands of newspaper articles and went through Disney reports and Disney annual reports, and went to different archives actually as well. And certainly spoke to dozens of people that were around at the time, and or descendants of people who were there at the time, or people who were just kind of experts on the subject as well. But yeah, certainly a lot of different research that went into this, and hopefully helped to put together a good book.
Well, the project was 10 years in the planning stages. I mean, I can't imagine how many years in time that you put in it for the research.
Yeah, this all kind of started in 2018 with a trip to the Walt Disney Family Museum in San Francisco, where we kind of first heard about the project and got interested by it. And then we did probably 3 or so years of research, and then once we started writing, realizing we needed to do even more and fill in the holes. So it was quite the endeavor, it really was. But it was a lot of fun.
I'm shocked that this did not happen, because, I mean, boy, you talk about the perfect place and the perfect idea. You've got yourself a winter wonderland, and then in the summer months, you've got yourself, something where kids can come and play as well, just like a Walt Disney World.
Exactly. So, yeah, I mean, this would have been such a big part of the Disney empire. And this was actually right after this was about 5 years after Disneyland was developed as well. So this was actually going to be their second experiential destination. They were also at the same time kind of starting to plan Walt Disney World, but Mineral King would have come first, and it would have been certainly, a really important part of the company. But the problem was there was just a ton of opposition, because, we're talking about the 1960s and 1970s, and that was certainly a ripe time for that kind of environmental opposition to developments. And of course, then you're talking about Disney, and a lot of people kind of, thought that they were this cheesy company, just, in terms of what they built in Disneyland. They didn't want that to happen in this, pristine area.
But see, the thing is, in my heart as a kid, Disney to me was that place where you could go to explore. And then when you hear about parks like this, where they take a chance, it's like, oh my God, that's every bit the reason to love them even more, because you're right. They would go in there and research it and then start planning it.
Right. Yeah, it would have been a great, at least according to Disney, would have been this, again, like you said, I mean, this great kind of escape. And it would have, it would have been different, because this would have, where Disneyland was this, magic kingdom full of fantasy and magic. This really would have celebrated the natural wilderness that was there, the natural beauty that was there. But it's still, with the Disney touches on there, would have been, like you said, a great escape for people to go and really experience nature in this whole new way.
Only because I'm such a nature freak, and my own forest that I have is all North Carolina trees. How would they have done the landscape for something like that? Because Disney wants the perfect layout. Would they have let it grow by itself, or what was going on?
Yeah, they really were looking to, they talked about camouflaging the ski lifts, building the parking underground. I mean, when Walt later said, when I first saw Mineral King, I thought it was one of the most beautiful spots I'd ever seen, and we want to keep it that way. And he said that as far back as 1965, when Disney first won the rights to develop the area. So, it wasn't something he said later to sort of counter the environmental opposition. It was really something he believed all along. And their goal was to, have this resort area that would have really blended in nicely to the surrounding scenery and, again, to camouflage lifts and things like that, and really just integrate this into the landscape as much as they could and keep as much of the area wild as they could.
Were parts of these visions put down in Florida? Because there's so many different areas down there that are very environmental safe and where they're embracing, the atmosphere of Florida.
They, with Florida, they sort of stuck with this idea of theming, like the Polynesian resort, the contemporary resort, where they were still sort of building these quote unquote Disneyfied resorts and things like that were a little bit of escape from the norm. They did actually preserve, as part of the original planning in the 70s for Disney World, preserve like a huge number of acres for kind of a wildlife preserve. But it really wasn't until, later projects were built like Aulani in Hawaii and things like that, that they really started to think about, theming the resort to fit in well with the surroundings.
Yeah.
But as far as also what they were creating for this Mineral King, California area, there's a couple different attractions essentially that later made its way into Walt Disney World.
Wow. Would Mickey have been a part of this?
We don't know for sure. I mean, there were some kind of rumors. We couldn't confirm it, but there were some rumors that Donald Duck would be giving a wilderness talk and wilderness walk. So I think there's a chance that the characters, I'm sure, would have made their way to the resort later on. But he kind of said that he didn't want it to be quote unquote a Disneyland. And so that was kind of the fear. And that's kind of why we named the book what we did, Disneyland on the Mountain. But there were kind of Disneyland-ish aspects, of course, to it, even though it was, again, about like preserving the area, making it accessible for people and celebrating that natural beauty. Of course, this is Disney. This is Walt Disney. He's very creative. He wanted to create a couple of different things. One of which was actually the Country Bear Jamboree, which a lot of Disney Parks fans are familiar with. That was originally intended for this Mineral King resort.
What's really interesting about this is that the fact that in the 1960s, while this was taking place, to have a park that would cater to the winter people as well as the summer people. It's happening now with a lot of today's parks, because I know Carowinds here in Charlotte is open year round now, and they embrace it. They embrace the winter theme and everything. I mean, it's like Walt was he was so far ahead of his time.
Yeah. He definitely was. I mean, a lot of the things that he had planned, this year-round resort that would have, the shopping, the hotels, the restaurants, and things like that. That wasn't really as, popular or as widespread back then. I mean, he was sort of a pioneer of a lot of that. And now you see, pretty much every ski resort has summertime activities. Every ski resort has entertainment and, the shopping, the restaurants, sort of the family feel. But back then, that was really a new idea.
What was it about the 1960s, the Olympic Games that year, that did it serve as an inspiration, or was it a knock on someone's heart?
So it did serve as an inspiration. So that's our story more or less begins with in 1960. So Walt Disney was the chairman of pageantry at the 1960 Winter Olympics, and so he was tasked with a lot of entertainment, and he reimagined the opening ceremonies and closing ceremonies and did everything, as you could imagine, it was a big spectacle. And he kind of modernized it into what we imagine the Olympics as today. And when he was doing that, he kind of saw, how the entertainment affected the athletes, how it all came together. There was sport, there was spectacle. He kind of looked around and said, I could do something with this. I can do something even better than what is being created here. And that was a lot of his inspiration for starting to think about this ski resort, this year-round destination. And it was also where he met a man named Willie Schaeffler, who was a famous ski coach. And the two of them would create this together, and Willie would be in charge of creating the slopes and the runs and things like that.
I can't imagine skiing at a resort like this because, we would have dressed up because that's just what Americans do. We would dress up like our favorite characters. And to see that coming down the hill or stopping at a hillside bar or something, and you're walking there going, oh, my God, this is not anything like up in Montana or even Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
Yeah, it definitely would have been different. It would have been really cool to see sort of what it would have become. And Walt said at the time as well, as he said with many of his projects, but this is something that we'll keep building, we'll keep perfecting over the years and keep changing. So it really, had it been built, it would have been really interesting to see how it would have evolved over the years and what it would have become. Part
of celebrating the 100th anniversary, one of the greatest things that I've loved is looking at the pictures of the construction. I'm the weird one. I want to see that stage being built. Did you get to see photographs like this?
We did. We saw some of their early concept drawings and things like that. Yeah. And they're not in the book, but we do have a lot of other images. But basically, for people who are interested, here's a secret. If you Google Disney Mineral King, concept drawing, you will find it. You will find it somewhere. But yeah, there was, as you can imagine, kind of very romantic scenes of horse-drawn sleigh and things like that, and lit, shops and things like that. And but yeah, so they did start that.
So what was the big problem? What got in the way? Was it the environmentalists?
It was the environmentalists. Yeah, this was this Mineral King area in California where Disney was going to build this land, which the Forest Service had put this land up for lease, up for bid. So it wasn't like Disney just came in and chose this spot at random. I mean, this is something the Forest Service had offered up. But it was a favorite spot of the Sierra Club, which at the time and still today was one of the largest environmental organizations in the country. And there was a small cabin community up there as well. This is a former mining area that over the years had a small resort and cabins and things like that. So between those two groups, there was just a lot of opposition to this big, what they thought when they looked at Anaheim and Disneyland and sort of what had grown up around that. They were really opposed to this Disney development in this beautiful part of California that they really thought was one of the great natural spots in the state, and they didn't want to see it develop.
Why California? We all know what Californians are. They are environmentalists, and they are very protective of the laws and things. I mean, they could have built something like this in other parts of the nation.
They did actually look at other areas, including Colorado, as you could imagine, because it's a big community.
God.
But I mean, I think California was Walt was obviously very familiar with California, having lived there, and he had gone to Mineral King, so he really kind of fell in love with that area. But I think that, again, with the time, the 1960s, the 1970s, before that, we weren't seeing a ton of opposition like this. Mm-hmm. So this is kind of the beginning of that. So I think it was also a timing issue, not just the location, because we're also seeing, this is, as we write in the book, we're talking about the first Earth Day is around this time where, there's laws now to protect and have, against pollution and to make sure there's clean water and clean air. So a lot of it is really what time this was.
What about the transition of power, though? That caught me off guard. I didn't realize that was taking place.
Yeah, that was super interesting to us. I mean, so much was happening at this time, which is just so fascinating, which makes this hopefully a fascinating read. But Walt Disney essentially passed away during this story. He passed away pretty unexpectedly in late 1966, and his brother Roy took over for the company, and he did it, fairly reluctantly. He was in his 70s at that time. He never saw himself. I mean, he certainly was a leader in the company, but he didn't want to be kind of the face of the company. And so there's a lot of different transitions that was happening around that time. And, other people, including Roy himself, they weren't really sure about, why Walt wanted this ski resort. Roy had said kind of behind the scenes, we're in the amusement park business, we're in the movie business, we're not in the ski business. He wasn't necessarily a fan of it, but the company wanted to continue with what Walt wanted. And that was actually very heartwarming because you'd seen that momentum kind of continue. And that was kind of this calling card for them. They really wanted to do this for Walt. They wanted this Mineral King project. They wanted the Florida project. They wanted everything that Walt wanted. And that continued in Roy's leadership of the company. And it continued after Roy, too, including a man named Carl Walker, who then became the Disney president for quite a few years.
You know, as business people, you look at that story right there and you go, you know what? They were doing it for Walt. You know, we got to stay true to what put us on the map.
Yeah, that was exactly what they kind of said as they went forward. And even, you know, there was a legal case that started that's covered in the book that went all the way to the Supreme Court. And after that, even that Card Walker, this president, he took out a full page ad and a bunch of papers around California and said, you know, I was there with Walt at Mineral King. This is what Walt said he wanted. This is why we're doing this. You know, we need your help. We need your support. Sort of an appeal to the people of California to get behind it. But really the whole time was this idea that, yeah, we have to do it for Walt. This is one of his final dreams. Let's make it happen. How
important was it to keep the name Mineral King? Because I don't feel a Disney-esque about that name.
Yeah, that was the name of the area. I mean, so this was a former mining area, you know, that had been part of the gold rush back in the 1800s. Nice. And that was just where we did see there was at one point something called Sky Crown, but we weren't sure if that was a restaurant or some kind of a property within the resort, or that was the name that they were thinking of for the resort. But yeah, for whatever reason, they just kept it as the name of the area, maybe just because they thought that was sort of more authentic and more true and sort of less Disneyfied, and maybe, you know, represented their desire to make this a more sort of natural recreational experience.
I know what a lot of musicians have to go through in order to record a Disney song. I mean, they've got to get some permission. Did you guys have to go through the same walk?
We did not. We were in communication with Disney early on about using some artwork and things like that, and we unfortunately our timing was just off to make it happen. But you know, it's a nonfiction book of history that's, you know, hopefully researched and sourced well. So there's, you know, we did work with the Walt Disney Family Museum some, and we talked with a bunch of Disney employees, people that were there at the time, but we never sort of formally went through Disney for permission. So.
Yeah. What's really great about this book, Disneyland on the Mountain, is the fact that it's a part-time law. There's also a section in there that has a mystery. And you sit there and you struggle with questions that were, you know, that are going on through your own head as a reader. I mean, there's so much emotion for someone to read this book, but yet in the end you're going, this really happened. This was not made up.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. We certainly, you know, we obviously wanted to put a lot of heart in it and emotion, because it was highly emotional for people. You know, this was really important, again, for the Disney company, for Walt in particular, and certainly for a lot of those who opposed it. So, and a lot of what we did was we really wanted to kind of, you know, give equal weight to both sides and kind of have people decide for themselves, you know, should this have been built or should it not have? And we kind of switched points of view, essentially, you know, more or less every other chapter, as far as, you know, here's where Disney is coming from, here's where the environmental side is coming from. So we hope we did that justice. And we're excited to hear what people think, too, when they read the book and, you know, what they think. And we're certainly curious and would love to hear from readers.
Imagineers became a documentary, and it also was a book. So therefore, are we going to see a documentary out of this?
That would be really cool. I mean, there's enough there for a documentary for sure. So, you know, that probably would be for somebody else to make, but we would be more than happy to assist in any way we could, because it really would be a super interesting story.
So just reach out to us, and anyone who's interested, we will we think it should happen.
Wow. You got to come back to this show anytime in the future. I love Disney stories because, once again, I'm fascinated with foundations that grow. Even if it goes to the Supreme Court or whatever, it's still a story. It's Americana.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, it's such a huge part of, Disney history, but also American history. And obviously we're kind of Disney history nerds. We kind of had to be for writing this, but yeah, I mean, it's such a massive part of history.
Absolutely.
So we're excited that we got to tell it.
Excellent. Well, please come back anytime because the doors are always going to be open for you.
Oh, thank you so much. We certainly hope to.
You be brilliant today, okay?
Okay.
Oh, you too. Thank you so much.